Well, welcome, Frans, and we're so blessed to have you. Everybody, I'd like to introduce Frans Stiene here for you today, and he's coming to us from Holland. And most of you will know some of his books and some of the work that he does with the International House of Reiki. He has also been a major global influence in researching Reiki since about early 2000s. And he's worked all over the world, and including really studying deeply the Japanese techniques as well. So welcome, Frans. We are so
Thank you,
blessed
Carol.
to have
Thank
you
you for
here.
inviting me.
Excellent.
Great.
And so what we want to do today is just ask you a few questions. And the reason I decided to do this is I had this dream 3 days in a row that I was going to be contacting leaders in Reiki and healing and just interviewing them while I'm still in this position of the chair for Reiki Australia, because I really want to open people's minds and hearts to Reiki, because you know, in the Western style, we're, you know, very limited in some of the things that we do, and it's mostly based on the hands-on factor. But what I've found through interviewing all the others that I've spoken to so far is most of them, once they get to that master level, as most of us do, they've gone on that longer journey and started to work on the spiritual nature. So I want us to be able to share some of the things that you do just to help open up people's minds and hearts to the depth of Reiki. So welcome, and could you tell us a little bit more about yourself as a human being, rather than we just focusing on the Reiki, where you grew up, and all those little things about you know, your family life, where you're living, your wife, and then we'll get on to the Reiki stuff.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because I was born in Holland and then I lived in Australia when I was 21 for a year. Then I went back to Holland again, and then I was 30, and then I lived in Australia for 20 years. So it was great. We had a Reiki retreat center in the Blue Mountains. So it was absolutely wonderful. And Bronwen is still teaching there. So yeah, I live in Holland now, back in Holland. And I was talking to my mom. My mom is 86. And the other day she said something. She said, "Oh, remember, Frans, when you were 13, 14, she said, you always gave everything away." She said, "Oh, to little friends, do you want this? Take it." Or, "I don't need it." And she said, "Oh, I don't need to work because I have already everything." And so I think as a kid already, I was doing these things without knowing it.
Yeah.
Being quite not holding on to a lot of stuff. And I remember that a little bit in my older days. But I wasn't interested in spirituality at all, or the system of Reiki meditation. And from 16 till about 30, I had really bad back problems. So I started to go to doctors. They said that we can do anything, just take really heavy painkillers. And then I also started drinking. So all of kind of these things mixed together didn't really help.
As people do.
And so one day we decided to go to India, to travel there, Bronwen and I. And when we were there, we went to the mountains in the Himalayas, and there was a healer, and I had this amazing experience with her. When she touched me, it was like in a house full of other people. If you said it was 1 second, 1 day, or 1 month, I couldn't really. It was timeless space. I became super hot from my toes to my crown. I started to cry. And after that, not necessarily that straight away my back was better, but I wanted to buy books on spirituality. So I started to buy books on Buddhism, on yoga, and one book was about Reiki, and then one thing led to another. So
as it does. Yeah. Okay. And so would you have called that your spiritual awakening, or have you had other experiences where you've had that awakening as well?
Yeah, I think in a way, you know, like for me is when we talk about spiritual awakening, it almost sounds something really big. But I think if we really look at it, for example, is when we look at little kids, some of these kids are already so open. I had a hands-on healing a while ago during a share evening, and it was someone's daughter who was 11. And I was not initiated into Reiki and said, Mom, can I join in? Yeah, okay. And said, can I do hands-on healing on Frans? Okay. Man, it was amazing. And because these kids are still so open, so pure, but then of course school happens and all the other stuff happens. And then we get sidetracked and we put kind of these, I see it, we put these lampshades on it. But yeah, definitely in India, I've also worked with a Taoist teacher for a long time, and she was really able in that deep interconnectedness to help me to find this inner luminosity even more so. And then since 2012, been working with a Japanese priest in a little temple in Japan, and that also has really accelerated that luminosity as well.
And so when did you when did you actually start your Reiki training, and who did you train with first? Because I know you've done Western style training, but you've also trained with Hyakuten Inamoto, and so have I actually, and a few other people. So could you tell us about that?
Yeah, we first started with an English teacher in Kathmandu, and we lived there for a while. So we lived in the Himalayas for a year. And it was very modern kind of teaching. It was interesting, and it definitely triggered something within me. But then I wanted to know, where did it come from? So then in 2001, we went to Japan for the first time, did a training with Hyakuten Inamoto, met up with Mrs. Yamaguchi. Then 2003, I trained with Hiroshi Doi in Japan. Then I started to train with Chris Marsh in England. Then I also started to do some other training. There was a small group in late 1999, early 2000s. There were a few teachers in America, Canada, England, and we were in contact with them. And it was a small group doing research and also sharing a lot of these practices from modern teachings and more traditional teachings. And but I still, for myself, I mean, we're all different, but for myself, I still hadn't found what I was really looking for. And so I kept looking, and I wanted to train with some very specific priests in Japan. And so finally in 2012, I was allowed to train with one. You can't
So
just roll.
were they doing Reiki as well, or you were just really working on your spiritual path then?
They don't. Well, I mean, that's debatable if they do Reiki, of course, but it's really where Mikao took his teachings from. So when we look, for example, at the attunement or Reiju, we can see traces of Japanese esoteric teachings when we look at the first symbol and mantra, or even the second, the third, and the fourth one. Again, we can see traces where Mikao took it from. And prior to Mikao, the priest and the priestesses, they were the healers of Japan. So a lot of these people practice very similar teachings. And so for me, I really wanted to see, for example, like behind me, you see the precepts in Japanese. And the one word, what always stands out is today. And we think that is Mikosui's invention, but in fact, in Zen or in Tendai Buddhism or in Shingon, a lot of these old teachers already said, today, be here right today, in the now. And then to hear actually their teachings from their perspective, what today really meant for them, I found very fascinating. And so also for those people who are trained with in Japan, is their tradition and lineage is very important, and it's almost like unchanged, so they don't really change anything. And for example, I have a prayer booklet here from a very ancient old text in Shugendo, and also they describe the word Reiki. So it's really interesting to see these elements at play. And so therefore I wanted to know, where did Mikao took all this stuff from? And then how was it applied in Mikosui's time?
So I actually had an understanding that that he took the precepts from the Magi Emperor at the time. That was, I don't even know where I learned that, but that was what I believed. And that that he then sort of evolved them and put them into the Reiki practice as a way for us to be fully present in the now. But that was
Yes.
where I thought they came from.
I mean, when you take the precepts, for example, in the Japanese way, and you take them to a priest or priestesses in Japan and show them, they will say, oh, these are like used also in Buddhism in Japan,
Yep.
but then in slightly different way, and then very much linked to the 8 paramitas or the sixfold path.
Yes.
What is, for example, right speech or right action. And we cannot really see this, of course, when we read it, because when we look at the surface meaning, we don't see that there. But in Japan, you also have what I call like inner meaning. So you have surface meaning, what is very visual, and you can see it. And an inner meaning, you have to practice to really lay that bare. And so, for example, when my anger softens, then of course my right speech comes forward. When I'm less worried and less angry, then of course my right livelihood comes forward. So all of these elements are really interwoven within the precepts on a more hidden inner level.
True. Very true. And so can you share us a little bit, share some information about your actual, when you started the International House of Reiki and the countries that you're working in at the moment?
Yeah, so we started with Bronwen in Darjeeling in India, and we had a Reiki center there for a year. And what we were really doing was volunteer work. So we did treatments on people who were sick in the tea plantations. We were taken there in a jeep with a translator and a driver, and they dropped us off with the people who were sick, and we do hands-on healing. Then we also did a lot of training of volunteer, teaching people Reiki 1. So that was really the beginning of our journey. And then when we came to Sydney, we started a Reiki center, first in Glebe and then in Newtown.
I think I've
then,
walked past that many times when I've been to Sydney over the years.
Oh, probably. Yeah. So that was great. And then we opened, and we had that for many years, a retreat center in the Blue Mountains. So yeah, that really started to evolve. And when we did this research early 2000, we had these files with Reiki on the side. And then one gentleman came one day and he said, what are these files? And we said, oh, this is all about Reiki. He said, let me have a look. And he looked at them and he said, you should write a book. And so we started to write the Reiki Sourcebook. And he was into the publishing world and he said, I'll get you a contract. So that was kind of the beginning. And then when we started when the book was published, the Reiki Sourcebook, and it's going to be republished again soon in a new jacket and like a fresh little way. So it is exciting. Then we were invited to teach in Canada and America and England. So we started to travel. And now, yeah, I travel the world. I was just teaching for a month in America. And before that, I was teaching in England and Paris. And next week, I'm going to do a retreat and a Reiki 3 class in Italy. Actually, a whole team from Australia is coming over.
That's awesome. That's wonderful.
To stay on Sardinia and do these 2 classes. So I'll be there for 3 weeks. So it'll be fantastic. So yeah, I love it. It's so nice. And it's not for me only to teach, but I really like, one thing what I really like is creating community where people of like-minded want to practice, want to work with each other. And therefore also sometimes, for example, the Australian people, for example, who are coming to Sardinia, they know also some of the people already in Sardinia.
Oh, that's good.
Because they came to a trip we did last year in Japan. So, it's nice to create this global kind of community of like-minded people.
I agree. I interviewed Franco Javapeta last week. And
nice.
And he lived in Japan for 12 years, but he's doing the Jikiden Reiki. He's the vice president. And I'm just wondering, because you've also done a lot of study in Japan, whether or not you're doing some of the similar things he's doing, because I know primarily you are a Suishiki Reiki Ryoho, and incidentally, then we'll be in June, we're also going to have Johannes on our interviews as well, which will be wonderful. But do you know whether or not you've got any similarities to the things that Ajava does?
Of course, there's always similarities. We have the hands-on healing or hands-off. Some people teach only hands-off. Some people teach only hands-on. For me, it's like a mix. What I believe what Mikao was doing was teaching hands-on healing and a very elaborate spiritual path.
Yes.
And so some schools focus more on the hands-on healing on themselves or on other people, and some schools focus more on these very elaborate paths. And for me, personally, and this is where we're all different, I think hands-on healing, of course, it's a birthright, right? We all do this already. If a child falls over, grabs to their knee, or the mother puts the hands on the knee. So it's a birthright. But we can enhance it in a way by doing these very specific meditation practices we saw within Mikao's teachings, like Joshin Kokuho, Seisin Toitsu, Hatsureiho. And also, for example, when we look at the precepts, it's all about a state of mind. So within the precepts, we don't see anything about hands-on healing. It doesn't talk about energy or that we need to feel energy or analyze it, but really working with the mind. And when we look at the symbols and the mantras, for example, they already came from Japanese tradition. So, for example, I was on this mountain for 5 days. It's very remote in Japan, and you can only stay on this mountain when you belong to certain Shugendo traditions. And Shugendo, there's a lot of healing as well. And I'm sitting there doing these meditation practices with my teacher, and on this pillar, there is this symbol. And I got like, wow, this looks like the first symbol in Reiki too. And so I go to a priest, the head priest of this mountain, and I draw what we draw in the system of Reiki. And the first thing this priest says, oh, this in our tradition means go to Kami. And Kami means God, but your inner God.
Okay.
So he said, yeah, this symbol for us was really used and is still used as go to your inner divine being.
Perfect.
And so when we look at these tools, then it's quite different than, for example, Jikiden Reiki, or also Jikiden Reiki is coming through the Hayashi line in a way.
True,
and
that's so true. Yeah.
For me, I really like to focus on where did Mikao got his teachings from? How was it practiced there? What was the baseline of that? And when we start to investigate that, we get something very unique and very interesting.
Very different.
And for me, it's really about laying bare this inner great bright light. So for example, the word Reiki in some of these traditions.
Heaven and earth. Yeah.
Yeah, but so for example, Reiki in these esoteric Japanese teachings means your Buddha nature.
Ah, right.
So it's your inner luminosity, your inner Buddhahood, or sometimes called kami in Shintoism. So it's one and the same thing. We should not get confused by that they're different words for the same thing.
Yeah.
And therefore really laying bare that we are Reiki. It's not something external. Every single cell is Reiki. And therefore, I really also like, for example, Hiroshi Doi did lots of research in that too. And he also realized that many teachers after Mikao changed a lot. And a lot of the teachings made it a little bit more simpler, a little bit more accessible, what is great. We have to start somewhere. And I think, therefore, there's many different entrance points and viewpoints. One is not better than the other.
Yeah.
And
I think that's the biggest thing that we need to come to terms with, because everybody's mine is better than yours. And then that gets back to religion and politics. When there's the many rivers to the one ocean. That's what I often think. And I know you also And our Java as well, we see that the precepts are actually a pathway to coming into our Buddha nature and coming into our great white light, that luminosity. So would you like to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, in fact, the precepts themselves are a description of our inner luminosity, because when we have really laid that bare, automatically there is no anger, automatically there is no worry. So automatically the quality of this luminosity is being grateful, is being true to our way inner being, and it is being compassion. So for example, the quality of water is wet, right? And I can't make this water more wet. I can also not distract wetness from the water. So often, and this is, I think, a very crucial point and also a big difference. So for example, when we look at water, we can see that we cannot add wetness to it. We can also not distract wetness to it. The quality is
Its
already
true
wet.
nature
So
is as it is.
as it is. The quality of our inner luminosity is already energy, is already compassion, is already kindness. So it's not that when we practice, we gain more light or we gain more energy or we gain more compassion. Is actually realizing that our essence is pure compassion, that our essence is pure energy. So in a lot of these teachings, we also see the symbol of the sun and the moon in there. And when we look at the symbol of the sun and the moon, for example, I look at my window. I've got really big windows here. There's cloudy. And then when the clouds part, we say, oh, it's becoming brighter. But the sun never became brighter. It's only our
The sun has
one.
always been shining its light. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's only our viewpoint where we say it's becoming brighter. So therefore, it's about realizing what we inherently are already, that we are already Reiki, that we are this luminosity, that we have all this energy already in us. We just are not aware of it because most of the time we focus on the clouds. We focus on our anger, we focus on our worry, we focus on attachments. And this is, if we also look at the precepts, we see very clearly, again, on an inner level, that it's all about letting go of I, me, mine.
I
I am
agree.
getting.
Coming back to the oneness rather than duality.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, where am I up to with my little questions? The chanting, I know, I bought some of your CDs years ago with different chanting, bits of chanting on it, and some of the Japanese style techniques. And I know you really do focus on your chanting as well as a way to lift your vibration. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, for example, when you go to Japan, you go to the monasteries, there's a lot of chanting, Heart Sutra, there's mantras, there's sounds in Shintoism, very simple, like, for example, the A sound or A, O, U, E. And so traditionally, again, when we look at the precepts, we see, for example, we see a few interesting things. We see, first of all, we see Shinshin Kaisen. And Shinshin Kaisen means mind-body harmony.
Oh.
Now, my body is always here. My body is not in the past. My body is not in the future. My body is right here. But my mind, most of the time, is in the past or in the future. So therefore, there is no
Separation.
no mind-body harmony.
Yeah.
And when we work with the precepts, therefore, if we do it correctly, then we can really facilitate this mind-body harmony. So, for example, also in the precepts, it says chant with your mouth. So there's, for me, it's a very big difference between chanting or reciting. And of course, we can say chant it 3 times or recite it 3 times, but we all know that it's not that easy. What I mean by that is, if we think that suddenly by chanting it daily 3 times, that there is no more anger, no more worry, that we suddenly pure compassion, then I would give everybody here in Amsterdam a sheet and say, please, everybody, just read it 3 times every day. And then within a month, Amsterdam will be the most compassionate city in the world. We know that doesn't work like this. So traditionally, these monks and these nuns or priests and priestesses would chant for hours, like literally hours. And so when we look at Mikao, when he was on Mount Karama, and Mount Karama in Mikaui's time was a Tendai Buddhist mountain.
Yes, yeah, I knew that.
So these people at that time, when they would do these 21-day practices, they still exist today. It was nothing unique. And prior to the 21-day, you would have had practiced a 7-day practice, and then you would have practiced a 3-day practice. And then before that, you would already have done lots of training. And you would do lots of chanting. And why chanting? Because we have our body. So also, when we look at the precepts hidden within it, we see Sanmitsu. And Sanmitsu means the 3 mysteries: mind, body, speech. So we have the body, what is very tangible. So if I ask you to put your hands on your heart, very easy to do. But if I ask you to not anger and not worry, very difficult to do because it's super subtle. But the speech part, I can hear, I can feel it. And therefore, it's a link between the very physical body and the more subtleness of the mind. And we can see this chanting in all traditions. We see it in old Christianity, we see it in Buddhism, we see it in Taoism, shamanic practices. They all have this chanting. Also, because it regulates our breathing. And so when we breathe more deeply in Japanese into the hara, just below your belly button, then of course we anchor ourselves into our body. That already when we anchored means we're less angry, we're less worried. Therefore also already we can be more compassionate. So therefore we see already also a link to these meditation practices like Joshin Kokyo and Seisin Toitsu, where you focus on the hara.
Yes. And
so I will give you an example. When we reciting the precepts in Japanese, it's a little bit like this. Yo dake wa ikaru na shinpai shuna kansei shitakyo hakame hito ni sensetsu ni. It's a little bit like this. But when we chant it, we first of all make sure that our body is in the right posture. So that Shin Shin Kaisen, what is explained in the precepts, mind-body harmony. So you put your body in the right posture, then you put your breathing in the right posture. That means not breathing up here, but doing a really nice deep breath into your hara. Then you put the mind in the right posture. So the mind already in that luminosity of the precepts. So already feeling this deep interconnectedness, that we are already this great bright light. And then from that, we could chant the precepts. Yo dake wa ikaru na shinpai suna kansha shite yo hakeme ito ni sensetsu ni. And that in itself already is very different than reciting.
So
and
true.
That in itself, when we chant it like this for maybe half an hour or 45 minutes, or maybe you do 8 times 45 minutes in a day, then that will have a very different outcome than if we recite it, for example, for 3 times.
Definitely.
And that outcome will have a very different effect on how we perform hands-on healing and the quality of our hands-on healing.
Well, everything's energy and information, everything's frequency and vibration. And I'm not sure whether you've seen the work of David Hawkins in the Power versus Force book that he put out probably 20 years ago now. And it was about the frequency of each vibrational emotion, and how he, grief was down on 20 or 30. It was out of 1,000. Enlightenment was 700 to 1,000. Love was on 500. Gratitude was somewhere around 540. But what he said was, if we can raise our vibration up to that of love or above, we can have a huge impact on the world. But
absolutely.
When we look at even meditating on the symbols, again, it's sacred geometry again. So we're focusing on the frequency that flows through us. But chanting is one of the easiest ways to bring that vibrational frequency into the physical body too, isn't it?
Yeah, because when we do that deep breathing, then when we really start to chant, that vibration goes from your hara, from your belly button as the core. It emanates out through your legs, through your torso, and also when in Australia we have these roads called corrugated iron roads, right? So where you drive your car and you go when the fillings fall out of your teeth and the mirrors fall off the car. So when we do this chanting, one of the byproducts is that it loosens everything up. So instead of being like this, because again, when we look at water, we can freeze it. And when we freeze it, we often become very quickly angry, worried, fearful, etc. But to melt it, we need heat. And this is, we all have probably experienced in hands-on healing or a meditation practice, this inner heat. And we can see this inner heat again very clearly described within the word Reiki itself. Also, actually, if we look deeply enough within the precepts. So when that heat comes from your hara, from your core, then automatically it starts to melt this frozen water, the frozen water of our anger, our worry, our attachments, our fears. And then, of course, that water flows much easier. And
Yes, so
here's an
Mrs.
interesting
Takata,
thing.
didn't Mrs. Takata say that focusing in on the hara was the secret?
Yeah, I mean, she wrote in a diary, really, in the early 1930s, that Reiki comes from within, and that we have to concentrate and meditate to let it come out, and that it lies at the pit of our stomach. So, I mean, like these teachings were already there, but unfortunately, it didn't really was taught a lot, and so yeah, one of the reasons. I like to really, again, work with those priests and priestesses is to really bring that kind of idea back into the world.
I think it's just wonderful because everybody I've spoken to has a different focus, and it's
Yeah,
really about bringing it all together. And as you say, Ajava's focusing on the Hayashi line, and
yeah,
what you've actually done is gone a step before all of that, because even you said the symbols, you've seen them elsewhere. Well,
yeah,
when I did my training, I trained in 1998. I was told that these symbols were actually part of the Buddhist teachings. They were found in some of the sutras, but he didn't understand the true way to put them to work for Reiki. But I used to teach Tai Chi and yoga for 10 years as well. And I
oh,
had
nice.
one of my students bought me this little $2 vase she bought at the $2 shop, and it had the Reiki Master symbol on it. It had all this
Yeah,
kanji on it, and I went, ugh. So it just made me smile, really, to realize, the symbols are they do hold different meanings, but the way we
yeah,
use them,
absolutely.
and once you put your intention on a meaning for something, then it takes on the energy of that, doesn't it?
Yeah, so for me, it's really I see it a little bit as that Mikao created a recipe, and if we look very carefully, we see a very
Precise.
strict and clear recipe on how to remember this inner luminosity. And so therefore I see it a bit as cooking. I'm not a good chef at all. So I need a recipe. And if I don't follow the right recipe, maybe I have to even throw the food out. So when we follow the right recipe, we get the right results. So for example, and there's nothing wrong with this, so don't get me wrong. So sometimes when we do hands-on healing, we say, oh, it's okay to watch television, or it's okay to go to sleep, or it's okay to chat. But when we look at Mikao, for example, in the precepts where he says Shinshin Kaisen, what means traditionally, this is also taught in Zen Buddhism, for example, um, mind-body harmony. And traditionally, Shinshin Kaisen meant that you need to stay focused.
Be
Your
fully
mind
present.
needs to be right here. So if I'm watching television, my mind is distracted, what means my energy is distracted. If I'm chatting about random things while I do hands-on healing, my mind is distracted, my energy is distracted. So Shinshin Kaizen really means stay focused with what you're doing right now, right at this moment. So the same is when we look at Joshin Kokyuho, the meditation practice. Joshin means pure. So pure mind. And pure mind through breathing in and out. So again, pure mind traditionally means in Japan, stay focused on what you're doing. And this is why there's actually some really old photos of people doing hands-on healing, students of Mikao, where they do sitting. So they sit in Seiza and they do hands-on healing on themselves as a form of meditation, being really focused. No talking, no thinking about yesterday, no thinking about the future, no watching television, and not sleeping either, right? Because when we sleep, we dream, we're also distracted. And when we then do hands-on healing like that, then that quality is very, very different.
Very true.
So when we look therefore at the recipe Mikusui left, Shinshin Kaizen, stay focused in your hands-on healing, stay focused in your daily life. And I think when we follow that recipe in a very clear way, and even the symbols and the mantras in that specific order in Reiki 2 and the one in Reiki 3 are a very specific recipe. They actually trigger something very specific. And that's been really my research and my practice. For example, when I train with this priest in Japan, you wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning and you practice till about midnight. And
Wow.
it's super intense. You do it for 10 days. And after that, you realize why Mikao practiced for 21 days on this mountaintop. I mean, he wasn't camping. He wasn't doing some like leisurely thing. I mean, these people practiced 20 hours practice. They slept maybe 3 hours a night. And so when you do this for 10 days or 21 days, the energy quality, your mindset is very, very different than if we do 10 minutes practice or we do unfocused practice.
Wow. Yeah. That I remember I did a Vipassana retreat in the Blue Mountains years ago for 10 days, and day 5, all my stuff hit the fan. But after that, I had the stillness. And I just remember how hard it was to stay focused for those first 5 days anyway. And 21 days would be a long time while you're sitting on a mountain. But it worked for him. And so we talk about everybody's got their own variations, and really people, that's humanity. We tend to put our own things that we like in there. What do you think about the modern trend for people to be doing their training online? Because lots of people are doing all sorts of things. What's your opinion on that? I'm not, but I'm just sort of checking with you as well.
Yeah, I don't teach Reiki 1, 2, or 3 online.
No.
For me, I mean, like, for example, it's very easy to see when we sit like this, you only see this part of us. I can't see what your hands are doing, what your feet is doing. I can't see the rest of what you're doing. But when I'm in a class, I get a very multi-dimensional aspect of, like, I sit now a little bit slumped, but you can't see it. But in a class, I can see it and I say, hey, Frans, sit up a little bit straight. Then Joshin Kokyuho goes much better. Then it's much better to do the deep breathing in your hara. So you can really work on a very focused, clear way with your students, with your clients. I do after support online. So
I do too. I've got pages with videos just to remind people about balancing chakras or hands on, full treatment or that sort of stuff. And I think that's good that we can use the modern tools as well.
Absolutely.
As long as we stay true to our roots. And teach person, one-on-one the way we're meant to, like in person.
I always say to people, like, I can say, oh, I love you and do a hug like this to
That's
Carol.
what I like too. The physical
But if you
touch,
give the
it's
person a
touch,
real
isn't it?
hug, is something very, very different.
Yeah, definitely. And interestingly enough, I know Hyakuten says that there was a lot of different systems called Reiki back in Japan when Mikao Usui did his training, but the difference was that he had the physical reiju, the attunement process, so that it was then able to be passed on from master to student. And that was why our modern Reiki is still alive today. And so I don't think you can do it justice. Yes, we can do distance attunements, we can do distance healing, but I don't think we're doing it justice if we sort of do that. And you hear of people saying, I learned level 1, 2, and 3, and it cost me $50, and I got it on Udemy Education. And you've got to wonder about the quality of that teaching.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for me also, for example, when we look at the attunement process, this again very clearly comes from Japanese esoteric teachings. So it's still being practiced by priests and priestesses in slightly different forms. And when we look at the quality of that, when you get like reiju from a priest or priestess who's done these mountain practices maybe for 21 days or maybe even 100 days or maybe 7 years, then is a very, very different quality. So particularly when that is in person, when you sit with them in a little temple, then
our auras are merging too, aren't they?
Luminosity. Yeah, the direct experience of this luminosity is very profound, it's very life-changing. And then we can use it as a seed. So when I liked it actually, because Mrs. Takata, when the system of Reiki came to the West, she called it initiation. And I like that when we have the initial experience. And the initial experience sometimes for people is, oh, I feel a little bit more peaceful, what means I feel less angry, less worried. I feel a little bit more compassionate. But that's the initial experience. And then we can water this initial experience like a seed so that it blooms fully. And that maybe one day during our whole day, and this is why Mikao said today, during our whole day, that there is no anger, no worry, that we are actually in this luminosity of a compassion what doesn't change according to circumstances. And I think it's really important to also therefore see how our practice is going for ourselves. It's not easy, but to use the precepts as a mirror for ourselves. How is my practice going? Do I still get angry? Do I still get worried? Am I actually grateful? Am I actually have compassion what doesn't change according to circumstances?
Wonderful.
And when we look at these elements, then we can really use the precepts in a very profound way in our daily life. Wonderful. And that, I think, is much better taught one-on-one or in a group setting where we can also work with each other. For example, online, very difficult to work with each other. But in a group setting, when we pair off and we do certain exercises at Reiki retreats, I do also a lot of Reiki retreats. And then when we pair off, we can really see, oh, I'm getting a little bit worried, or I'm getting a little bit upset about this, or how can we deal with it? How can we work with it?
Wow. Now, I believe you had some brainwave tests done while you were doing some Reiki and telling jokes, and they had your brainwave measured at delta, even while you were fully present. Now, that's pretty much unheard of, isn't it? Because delta is deep wave, deep sleep. I'm a hypnotherapist as well. And what I know sometimes is if I've got a client that I'm having, who's got a lot of anxiety and I'll just take my brainwaves down and then they'll sync. And how was it that you were able to get down to delta? Did you do that on purpose? Have you been practicing, or is that simply because of all your years of meditation practices?
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, delta, or sometimes called yoga nidra, is ultimately is in the system of Reiki is a mind space of the precepts. In that space, very difficult to get angry, very difficult to get worried. And the quality of that is really compassion and kindness. So it's linked, it's a symbology often like spaciousness or luminosity. So for example, Mikao used this wonderful description of great bright light.
Yes.
And when we look at light, for example, even if I say I have this little coaster, if I put the best sticky tape or glue on this and I try to stick it to light, nothing sticks to light. So the more we are realizing that we're actually made of light, then nothing sticks. And nothing sticks, then no anger, no worry. It's very simple in a way. And therefore, that state is really this very deep, spacious state. And ultimately, we need to be able to not do this just in sleep state or when we lay maybe in the corpse pose or when we sit in meditation. But as Mikao said, today. So also Mikao didn't say on a yoga mat, on a massage table, on a meditation pillow. No, he said today. So that today, in all the actions we do today, that we can keep that state of mind. And how do we do it? By integrating the precepts in our daily life, by doing Joshin Kopiho, Seisin Toitsu, Hatsureiho, by working with the symbols and mantras. And traditionally, these symbols and mantras were used for internal practices. And now we see them very much externally, but they were internalized. So for example, you would meditate for 45 minutes on them inside your body, inside your mind, inside your energy. And when we work like this, then automatically, slowly, we start to lay bare that we are Reiki, that we are this great bright light. And then very easy in a way, without the need to do anything, is already this wide open spaciousness. So for example, in one of the classes, or in most classes, I ask, okay, everybody, how do you touch the universe? And some people go like this, some people go like this, some people go like this. But in fact, we don't have to do anything.
We are the
touch
universe.
Because we are the universe. The universe is touching us left, right, and center. So in a way, we have all these methods Mikao put together, all these practices. And by practicing them a lot, many times for many years, we then come to a situation where we realize it is already who we are. We don't have to do the symbols and mantras anymore. We don't have to do even hands-on healing. We just rest our mind. And this is why the precepts are all about the mind. We rest our mind in this open spaciousness of no anger, no worry, being compassionate, etc. And in that open, expanded state of mind, that energy flows already, because that's the quality of spaciousness. This is the quality of openness. And in that wide open spaciousness, nothing sticks. So for example,
I love that.
again,
I love that. Yep.
If we look at the analogy of water, we can see this water also in the Reiki kanji. If I have a frozen river, if I have a frozen river and I throw something on the frozen river, it stays there. The next day, actually, it's stuck on the river. So if I am frozen and someone says something, it lands on me, it stays there. And the next morning, it's stuck and we carry it with us. We stay upset or worried for years.
Yes.
But now imagine that it's a flowing river. If I throw now that same thing in a flowing river, the next moment it's gone. Right?
So true.
So the more that mind stays in this very open space, automatically the energy flows all by itself. We don't have to do anything for it. It flows all by itself. Then whatever a person throws in, or we throw ourselves into this stream, the next moment it's gone. So therefore, no anger, no worry.
Perfect. Perfect. Now, I've actually been in that place in the light, and I've been there a couple of times now, and it is nothing but the brightest, purest light that feels like love and joy and peace. And as you say, openness and expansiveness. And I'm sure you've been there a few times too, because you've done a lot more work than I have. I've just had a few mystical experiences through the years.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is what all these teachers say is not that difficult to have these moments of these experiences.
Expanded,
Why?
yeah.
Because
Yep.
we are ready it. We don't have to work to become it. We are ready
Yes.
it. But how do we prolong it that we can be it during our daily life? That is the most important thing, because that's really where it counts, right? If I am
We can't go
really
and
quiet,
we can't live in that mountain, in that cave on the mountain for 40 years and still engage
absolutely.
as a human being. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I'm quiet and peaceful on my meditation pillow, and then I go out in my daily life and I'm still an asshole, then there is something wrong with our practice, right? So, for example, when I go to these teachers in Japan, these very traditional teachers, they say, Frans, you teach about the precepts, and they're going to check it. They're going to push you and prod you. They do things to see if you get angry, see if you get worried, see if you can maintain this compassion. It's not easy. As modern teachers, we find it very difficult to do. And if we do it, then people are like, why are you doing this? Or like this, they get upset. But I actually like it that my teachers do this, because
It's a
then,
test
yeah, it's a test. If they
to
can
see how
press a
far you've
button on
come.
me, means that there is still a button, right?
I
And so that
totally understand. Yeah.
is really fascinating. And I like this. And this um, it's a little bit harder to do for yourself, because we become a little bit too relaxed about it. But therefore, the precepts are a fantastic mirror on to see how our practice is going. And if we have to actually sit more on our butt and do our practice and do the meditations, internalize it more, to see if we do get angry, if we've become more open-minded, or if we become actually more narrow-minded.
Yeah, as I said, I went and did a Vipassana, but 10 years later, I tried to go back and it turned out I got banned. And I got banned. I got banned simply because I'd hugged a woman who came out crying and walked her back to her room. And anyway, so when I was ready and packed the night before, and I rang and said, I have got an email, and they said, oh, I'm so sorry, dear. Teacher has banned you and she's in India, so we can't even talk to her about it. And I got upset, and then I hung up, and then I gathered my thoughts and I rang him back and I said, you know what? The fact that that upset me tells me I've still got a lot of work to do on myself. So I want to thank teacher for that, because that's given me more direction. And I now feel that I will get more than what I need by doing this work myself. Thank you so much. And it
Yeah,
really is.
absolutely.
Yeah,
I
every
mean,
test is really just an opportunity for us to check ourselves and find out where we're at.
absolutely. I think this is the beauty of life. The tests lie in our daily life, because in our daily life, we get triggered by all sorts of things. And therefore, it's a great mirror to see how our practice is going.
Yeah, and it really is. When somebody triggers us, our question is, what is it within what you've done? What is it within me that's being triggered, so that we can then work on that?
Yeah, there's a great, for example, if I bump this, water comes out, not coffee, not tea, but water. So if someone bumps me, what comes out? If anger comes out, means anger is inside of me,
Very true.
right? If
Yeah.
love comes out, love is inside of me. So this is a really simple example. Like if I bump this, water comes out. Why? Because there's water in it. If someone bumps you and anger and frustration and anxiety comes out, is because it's in you. So then we know we have to deal with it. We know we have to do something about it.
Yeah, and clear whatever that is that's causing that emotion to rise up as a little sign for us to know what we still need to work on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, do you practice any other forms of well, you've already pretty much covered it, haven't you? All the forms of meditation and energy work that you do, they're all embodied in all the teachings that you've gotten from going to Japan and doing all your work on the Buddhist side of things. Can you share a success story from your practices? Something that you've done that's made a real significant shift in somebody else, or a difference in their health, or their well-being, or their attitude?
Yeah, I think, I mean, this is I think it's with anything, is no matter if we do meditation practices, yoga, tai chi, qigong, etc. And for me, again, one of the most wonderful things I think is when we reflect this back again on the precept. So I hear this quite a lot from people coming to the courses, that they say, oh, I feel actually less worried in my life. Like I feel
Perfect.
less angry in my life. I feel there is more kindness to people. I mean, we can talk about that we maybe see colors, or that we feel more energy, or that we can feel tingling or heat or pulsation. But nowhere that is written within the precepts, right?
Yes, that's
So,
right.
and also sometimes when we have those experiences, that can also become an ego thing. And
And
then
a
we can say, oh, but
distraction.
yeah,
Yeah.
and a distraction. I can see colors, or I can feel this or this. But when we really bring it back to the precepts, for me, that is the most profound thing, because when, for example, if I'm already kinder to the shopkeeper, and I say something kind, even that it's super busy, even that they made a mistake, I said, don't worry, I'll wait here, it's okay, can I help you actually, blah blah blah, then that shopkeeper already feels a little bit lighter. They
But that's
might
how we
go home.
share our Reiki, isn't it?
That's it. And then they might go home because they felt lighter. They might already come lighter to their family, and that has an effect on their family.
Mm.
So if we bring it back to feeling energy and seeing things, that is not really, that ripple
Not the
effect will
aim,
not,
not the purpose. Yeah.
is not
It's
the
about
purpose.
changing our lives and living our Reiki, isn't it?
Yeah. And definitely, therefore, as Mikao says, for example, in the third symbol in Reiki 2, if you translate that literally, it says, my original nature is right mind. So it puts your emphasis again on the mind. The mind is so important. And why is the mind important? Because my body wouldn't move without my mind. My breathing wouldn't move without my mind. My energy wouldn't move without my mind. So the mind is really the most important element. And we can see this pointed out by Mikao again and again and again. So what do we have to do with the mind? We have to realize this luminosity of the mind, this spaciousness of the mind.
Mm. This is one of the reasons I love doing the hypnosis that I do as well with Reiki, because, well, I say with, because they're both parts of my practice. I've got a few other things under my belt as well, but the style of hypnosis I do is called 5-path. And our aim is to not just talk at that person, but to do age regression back to before they ever had a bad feeling, and let them recognize their true nature, and then bring that forward, and then work with forgiveness as well. So it's sort of like a spiritual practice, but it always just seems to melt really well with Reiki. It's all about, it's not what we're putting into somebody's head or into their mind, it's what we're getting rid of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see it a little bit again when we look at that luminosity as
Yes.
a lampshade. And when we take the lampshades away, then we might even say, oh, the light becomes brighter. But if we look at the lamp itself, the lamp hadn't changed at all. It's just the way it was. So this is Reiki. The word Reiki is really that luminosity where it's never changed, but it looks like and it feels like when we peel away these layers that it's changing. But when we observe correctly, the light itself has never changed. And so the whole system of Reiki is remembering what we were, even, for example, in Zen, they say, before I was named Frans, right? I didn't come out of my mom and say, hey, I'm Frans. No, there's a label my mom and dad stuck on me. So what was I before Frans? And this is really also the concept of right mind. Right mind traditionally means, yeah, realizing what was there before all these labels.
True. I mean, and sometimes, as I was saying with age regression, sometimes we go back into the womb and we go back to find a time before they had bad feelings. Sometimes it's moments after conception. And
Oh, yeah.
and sometimes people will spontaneously go back into a past life. And I will then take them to the end of that light and say, what comes next? And, you know, probably 90% of people say, I can see a light. I go into that light. I become that light. I'm part of it. And I can feel nothing but love. And then we get their truth. And it's just, it's all about waking people up to their own true nature, isn't it?
Absolutely. And this is, yeah, one of my books, The Inner Heart of Reiki, rediscovering your true self. For me, this is really what Reiki is about. Hands-on healing is a little byproduct. Is wonderful. Yep. Don't get me wrong. It's wonderful. But again, I always say in a class, I cannot walk around Amsterdam and do like this to everybody, right? I get arrested. I get punched in the face. But as much as possible, I can walk around in this state of luminosity. I can walk around in this state of the precepts of, I can walk around in Amsterdam without anger, without worry, being kind and compassionate. Then that already has a huge ripple effect. And so this is really what Usui was talking about. He was not really saying you need to do hands-on healing or it's all about hands-on healing. Now, hands-on healing is just one tip of the iceberg. But the most important, the whole complete iceberg is really our state of mind. And that in reality affect everything, affects our whole life. It depends on how we wake up. It depends on how we go to bed. It depends on how we see our day. I can, again, focus on the clouds all day long, or I can focus on the bright, open spaciousness behind the clouds. And this is really Reiki. Reiki is that bright, open spaciousness behind the clouds in what everything takes place without grasping it.
That's true. That's true. And so, have you looked at the work of Masaru Emoto with the water? You'd know all about that.
Yeah.
And I just love that because it really just connects in with our intention, has an impact on everything. And then we forget that in the human level, our bodies are 70 to 90% water, depending on our age. And every thought and every word we put out has an impact on other people, but it also has an impact on ourselves. So again, it comes down to, one of the 10 commandments, treat other people the way you want to be treated. And
absolutely,
that's just woven in to the Reiki precepts as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you, for example, really say, Usui says, today, do not anger, do not worry. So I often give a teaching like this. I say to students, if I plant an apple seed, what do you get? They go, apples, and they laugh. I said, yeah, you don't get bananas, right? No, you don't get bananas. And it's okay, if you plant a banana seed, what do you get? Well, you get bananas, you don't get apples. Very easy to understand. So if you look at the precepts, Usui said, today, do not plant worry. Today, do not plant anger. Because if I plant anger today, don't expect kindness and compassion tomorrow, right? That is planting an apple seed and expecting to get bananas next week. And then you go, why? Why don't I have bananas? So if we plant worry, and for example, worry can be very subtle. So even in doing hands-on healing, say I have a headache, and then I'm going to do hands-on healing, and then I hope the headache goes. That's already a subtle trace of worry.
That says, I don't expect it's going to happen. I don't trust. I don't have faith.
Absolutely. I don't have trust. I don't have anything. So if we observe carefully, then we see a lot of these worries and fears and even anger in our hands-on healing. And that we need to purify. And therefore, Usui says, plant kindness today, plant compassion today, plant gratefulness today, because that is what then grows in the future. So there's a wonderful saying in a lot of these Japanese teachings. If you want to know about what happened in the past, look at your present situation, because your present situation is an effect on what you planted in the past.
Cause and effect.
If you want to look and work on your future, you don't have to look at the future. Look in your present situation. What are you planting today? Because that will affect your future.
Yeah. So again, cause and effect, isn't it? So
Yeah.
what is your vision for yourself and your Reiki in the future? Since you mentioned future.
Yeah, this is this is a really good one, because I've never been anybody who is really focused on the future.
Look,
Of course,
I'm with you pretty much too. I'm living in the moment, and whatever comes up, I'm going to deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, it's nice to see the system spreading. And for me, ultimately, is that we can live in a world where we can embody the precepts in all we do. I don't necessarily say we have to do all hands-on healing. I don't really care about that, because we can do hands-on healing and still be an asshole. But
Yes.
that we have the mindset of the precepts in all we do. I think this is the hope for me. If I want to have a hope, and I don't like hopes, because hope we also need to let go of, is a
Yes. Yeah.
pitfall. But if we can establish a world where there is an embodiment in each person of the precepts. In Taoism, there's a great saying, I love it a lot. If you want to have peace in the world, you have to have peace in your country. If you want to have peace in your country, you have to have peace in your family. If you want to have peace in your family, you have to have peace within yourself, right? And this
I've
is
heard that.
where it
Yeah.
all starts, within yourself. And again, Mikao says is so wonderful. For example, Thich Nhat Hanh, a very famous Buddhist
Yes.
teacher,
Yeah.
he said, peace is not something we hope for. Peace is what we have to be right now. And this is exactly what Mikao said. Peace, the embodiment of the precepts, is not something we hope for. Peace, the embodiment of the precepts, is what we do today in all our actions today. Just be kind.
Wonderful. I love that. And so, would you like to share any upcoming workshops? I'll share your website with people as well, and if you're okay with me sharing your Facebook page as well.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I just think we're all in this together, and we should be helping each other spread
I
this
think so
love,
too.
spread this kindness, and spread what we do. I'm a big promoter of everybody else, because I just think it just brings more community and spirit. So, anything else you'd like to share about workshops or upcoming things that you're doing?
Yeah, I'm actually at the end of this month. I'm teaching in Italy, in Sardinia. It's beautiful, close to the beach, and I'm teaching
Perfect.
Reiki retreat there and a Shimpuden Reiki 3 class. I do the same in England later this year. I'm doing actually this year also some private courses. So I'm teaching a private course in Poland. I'm teaching a private course in France. I just taught a private course in the UK. So these are people who have a group of like 10 people and say,
Oh,
Frans,
yes.
we want to work like this. I also do a couple of online classes, not Reiki 1, 2, or 3, but just to help people to go deeper. There's
And
one
look,
coming
that's
up
what I
in
was thinking. If you could flick those to me, I'll make sure they go in with this video, and I'll pop them in our Reiki Australia pages, but I'll also put them on our YouTube channel and share them. I'll put those links in there as well, so we can
Yeah.
share them.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Excellent.
And so, yeah, there's quite a few courses here in Holland. So sometimes I teach in Dutch, sometimes I teach in English. There is a Shimpuden Reiki 3 class coming in English and a Reiki 2 class in English. And I'm already planning next year. So yeah, I
Wow.
teach in the US. I teach hopefully next year again in Australia. So
But
yeah,
let
all
us know when
exciting.
you're coming, and we'll pop that up as well for everybody to see. That'll be wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm still working that out. So yeah, thanks.
Any last words? Any last messages for our wonderful viewers out there in Reiki land?
Yeah, there is no magic. The real magic ultimately is sitting on your butt and go inwards and do the practice and really find and remember your inner luminosity of love and compassion. For me, that's the most important thing. Sit on your
Wonderful.
butt and do the practice. Yeah.
Excellent. So thank you so much, Frans. It's been so wonderful to get to know you. And here's a a Reiki hug by
Thank
distance.
you.
And hopefully we'll be seeing you when you come to Australia. We'll have you back online again, and we'll do another interview. And if there's anything else you'd like to share, please feel free just to do that with us. So namaste. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for inviting me. And have a
Excellent.
wonderful rest of your day, or evening in Australia, evening.
Yes, it's now, I think it's about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, in the evening here. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Carol.
Namaste.
Bye-bye.
Bye.